Technology is a huge part of our society today and has been advancing at a mind-boggling pace. And because of this, it can be easy to fall behind. As a musician, it is important that we try and stay as much on the forefront of this as possible, since in some cases this can be the difference between getting or losing a job. In this video, I'm going to be going over some of the things that can be useful for musicians. I'm going to be splitting it up into two different halves. Easy stuff, which is stuff like metronomes, tuners, or earplugs, or stuff like that. Stuff that's not necessarily as cost expensive, or isn't necessarily as hard to get into, but is still extremely useful stuff for musicians to have. And in the second half, I'm going to be going over some of the harder stuff. Stuff like recording gear, such as mics or audio interfaces, stuff for live performances, such as in-ear monitors, and things that can just be more expensive or harder to use, but they're still staples of the music industry in general. The vast majority of Americans, now 95%, own a cell phone of some kind. The share of these Americans that own smartphones is now 77%, up from just 35% in a survey first conducted in 2011. So it's no doubt that a smartphone can be a musician's most useful tool. In the past, musicians would have to go out to stores to buy tuners, metronomes, sheet music, whatever it may be, but nowadays we literally have all of that right at our fingertips. Besides the multitude of metronome apps or tuner apps or reference apps that there are on the App Store and the Google Play Store, there's a couple apps that have stuck out because they have many extra features that are just really useful to musicians in general. One of these apps is called Tonal Energy. It's kind of like the multi-tool for musicians. It's got many different features that are useful to basically any musician regardless of what style you play or what instrument you play. It has stuff from tuners, so you can tune. You can have different tones played at once, and you can select different sounds that you want these tones to be played on. You can have an analysis thing that allows you to view the ups and downs of your sounds so that you can see what your attacks are like. It's got a metronome built in, and the best part is you can view literally all these things at the same time if you want. Another amazing app is the Amazing Slowdowner. If you're a musician who likes to learn new songs and techniques by listening to the same piece of music over and over, but wish that music could be played a little slower, then you'll enjoy the Amazing Slowdowner. You can repeat any section of music at full speed, slow it down, or even speed it up by changing the speed to between 25% or 1/4 the original speed, and 200%, which is double the speed without changing the pitch. You can even change the key of the piece that you're listening to. Now if you're into jazz, there's also apps for you. iReal Pro offers an easy-to-use tool to help musicians of all levels master their art. It simulates a real-sounding band that can accompany you as you practice. The app also lets you create and collect chord charts of your favorite songs for reference. Now if you're tired of carrying around those large binders of music, or you're worried that water and fire are going to damage these original parts that cost you lots of money, then tablet music might be a good thing for you. With apps like Fourscore, you can download or scan all your music into PDF form. This allows you to back up all your music online, you have it all in one spot, and with the use of foot pedals you can switch music without even using your hands. Which if you're a wind player or an instrument that uses your hands but doesn't use your feet, this can be a game-changing thing. Now we're going to change pace and talk about stuff besides apps that are super useful to musicians. Hearing is one of the most important senses to musicians because our art form is literally based around listening. And with the growing popularity of having large brass sections playing super loud, or with modern music with rock or electronic music just shaking the room, it can do a lot of damage to our ears, and we need to protect that. And earplugs can be a great way to do this. There are two basic types of earplugs. There's traditional earplugs, and then there's musicians' earplugs. Traditional earplugs you can buy in packs of 100 at places like Walmart or Target. They're cheap, they work, and they're not great. Musicians' earplugs, on the other hand, are a little bit more expensive, but they're special in that while normal earplugs will muffle the sound, musicians' earplugs don't. They actually keep the full clarity of the sound and allow you to hear everything just at a lower decibel level, which is great for classical musicians or musicians that want to not hurt their hearing, want to hear everything in clarity still. On top of this, both traditional and musicians' earplugs, you can get a molded version of these. What you do to get these is you go to an audiologist, and what they'll do is they'll put a special fluid in your ear so that they can create a mold of your ear. This way, when you send that mold to the company that makes the earplugs, they can mold it so that it's the exact same form of your ear. For both traditional and musicians, this can be great because the seal that seals off the sound is even more great. So that way, it will work even better. Now we're going to move on to some of the harder stuff, as I said at the beginning of the video. This stuff, like I mentioned, It's going to be more expensive and generally harder to learn. But these are all staples in the music industry, and they're useful things to maybe not have to get yourself, but they're useful things to know about so that someday when someone asks you about them, you can tell them. Nowadays with live performances, more and more musicians are using tracks or clicks with their band to soup up their live performances. More and more lights need to be timed to a clock of some sort. And more sound guys are taking off your monitors off the stage so you can't hear yourself as well. And this can be a weird thing for musicians that have gotten used to the traditional way stages have been set up. But nowadays it's a useful thing to invest in in-ear monitors. In-ear monitors let you have a custom mix of whatever you want. So whether you're a bass player that wants more kick, or you're a vocalist that wants to hear mostly just vocals, or maybe you're just a trumpet player that just wants to hear yourself scream. It doesn't really matter what it is, in-ear monitors let you hear whatever you want. Especially nowadays with the growing popularity of using tracks or timing lights out to the band, having a click in your ear can really tighten things up altogether. Like earplugs, in-ear monitors can come in both molded and non-molded form. The molded ones, like the earplugs, will seal off a lot more volume and you'll be able to get a lot clearer mix. While live performances are one of the most important parts of music in general, being able to record yourself is pretty much a given for most musicians nowadays. But getting into recording can be one of the most daunting tasks for musicians besides just straight up learning a new instrument. Now, recording someone can be as simple as using a $150 Zoom handheld recorder, or as complex as having a mic cabinet and rack that costs more than your entire house. Now, if you're just starting out recording, the first task you have to do is decide what DAW, or digital audio workstation, you're going to use. If you're using a Mac, you can start off with something simple like GarageBand, or you can go for the stars and get something like Logic. If you're on Windows, you can get something cheaper like FL Studio, and then both have access to tools like Pro Tools, which is the industry standard, and Ableton, which is another one that's coming up huge. Then after that, you'll want to think about what hardware you want to invest in, such as mics, for example. There are many different types of mics, but there's probably two that are probably the most common. There's dynamic and then there's condenser mics. Probably the most common dynamic mic that you'll see is the SM58. And this is pretty much a standard for live performances or recording in general, and you can't really go wrong with one of these. One of the downsides to a dynamic mic is that it's directional, and especially if you're trying to record a large group with minimal microphones, it can be hard to record sometimes. So then you want to think about maybe investing in a condenser mic. A large diaphragm condenser mic is a mic that has a very high range of frequencies and can pick up pretty much an entire room, and in fact this entire recording has been recorded on an AT2035. After that you can think about other mics, you can think about racks, mixers, monitors. You can pretty much just shoot for the stars, because I would almost have to create this whole entire separate video just on recording gear. And in fact, some people create entire separate channels just about recording gear. Well anyways, I'm going to be bringing this video to a close. While I'm barely scratching the surface of some of the different gear that musicians can invest into, I hope you've learned a little bit. I'll be linking a few different channels that will give you even more information about some of this stuff, so that you can find out more info. Well, I hope you enjoyed.